Welcome back to My Life, His Story. I'm Bryan Flannery, and today we have a really special guest. We have Dr. Wesley Northey the Fourth.
Hey, Bryan, thanks so much for having me today, man.
Yeah,
Bryan loves
man.
to throw out my full title, my full name, and everything, not to make it awkward at all. So I appreciate you, bro. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, absolutely. It's just such a powerful name, you know what I mean? Just dominance. I love it. It strikes fear in the hearts of men. Anyway,
That's what I'm talking about. I like that.
well, you know, I've gotten to get to know you. I've gotten the opportunity over the last few months. And, I wanted to start off and kick off today by asking you a very direct question.
Let's
If
go.
you if you could describe the environment in which you grew up in one word, what word would you choose?
Wow, that's a powerful question, man. One word. Unstable.
Unstable. Wow.
Unstable. Yeah. Yeah. I think,
So when you
unfortunately, I was thinking of, I'm like, man, there was a lot of good. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
A lot of love. But man, if I could think of one thing to kind of sum it up, it was that life was very unstable.
Yeah, and you make a great point. Like just because there's instability in it's unstable doesn't mean that there's not love and hope, right? But
That's exactly
and
right.
so walk me through like what was what was what were some of the contributing factors of this instability?
Yeah, I think so many young people grow up in environments it's a roller coaster ride, and I think there's no real sort of agreed upon sense of what normal is, but life's challenging when you're a kid and you're growing up anyway, especially
Sure.
getting into adolescence and teen years and those things. And yeah, the home environment that I had was so polarized between like I said, a lot of love, very, very heavy religious tradition practice on the one end with my mom, and then my father on the other side was just wild and drugs, lying, stealing, cheating, motorcycles, and just it was those two things that just caused this very unpredictable life to grow up in, for sure.
Wow, man. I think there's so many people that can identify with that too, right? Like I remember during the 90s sitcoms, there were all these sitcoms with these perfect families, right? And if you were anything like me, I remember watching those and going, man, I wish I had that. But now I look back and I'm like, man, I'm so thankful for the life that I had.
For sure. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think it's funny, shows like that, I think a lot of people retreat to. I know that I did, and you may have been the same, Bryan, but like we have those things as outlets, and when I was a
That's
young
right.
person growing up, it was video games, movies, TV shows. I used to draw a lot, so I'd just kind of escape into my art. And it was always a way to just kind of find some sort of other world to be in. And it's a coping mechanism, it really
That's right.
is.
That's right. And so you talked about the instability and kind of how that led through childhood, but you had some kind of key moments there as a teenager that this instability really came up in a big way that affected many years later. And so talk about that for a little. Talk about some of these moments as a teenager, if you will.
For sure, yeah. One of the big ones for us, so growing up as a kid in California, life was unpredictable, like we said, but then we moved to Arkansas. Kind of going into the teen years was, at the time, was a lot like moving to another country. And it just took a while to get settled in, but one of the major turning points shortly after was my mom had been expecting a little boy, so I was going to have a little brother. I had two sisters that I loved dearly, was very, very close with. I couldn't wait to have a brother, and we found out that he had a very rare disease called trisomy 18 and that he wasn't going to live. This was about halfway through the pregnancy. I was 12 years old,
Wow.
and we had just gone through like this, just another huge life shift. a lot of turmoil already happening. And so hearing that news, I'll never forget the day actually when my mom kind of sat me down and shared that with me, that Joseph wasn't going to live. And it was beyond, I was in shock. And it was honestly, man, to be real and raw, it was the first moment that I had thinking about taking my own life. It was my first experience with those thoughts of like suicide. And I just retreated in my bedroom, this young guy, and I just thought, wow, it could be over. It could be over right now if I just, decided to do that. And so, yeah, it was a difficult time for sure. A few things got stacked on top of that. So he was born, he lived for a day. He died on Valentine's Day. I was 13. So it was a few months after that. He died on Valentine's Day. And, we're going through this grieving process and mourning and a real sense of loss. And I know a lot of the audience members out there have loved ones that they've lost as well. And so the grieving process is never easy, but it's so important to go through that in a healthy way. And a short time after that, our house burned down. And literally, like, I was in the house with my mom and my sisters and woke up to my mom downstairs screaming. And I opened my door, man, and the whole living room was engulfed in flames. Ran and grabbed my older sister and run down the stairs. We escape out the back. The house is full of smoke at this point, and we make it to the driveway to where the vehicle was parked, and we had to get in on the passenger side because the driver's side was actually already melting from the proximity to the house. And got out, and I remember thinking, like, still again just this utter state of shock, but thinking about what were the belongings that I had in my bedroom, and I'm kind of rolling through it in my head, and I'm like, I wonder if I can still salvage this. I wonder if I could still get up the stairs, how quickly the fire department may have put out the fire, and what will be burned, what won't be burned, and I'm thinking of all these things that meant something to me that I wanted to keep. And so many people think that if you're in that situation, you're going to grab X, Y, and Z on your way out, but you don't. I mean, I had my PJs on that I ran out with and my family. And anyway, so we got back to the house. We had been at the neighbors getting checked for like smoke inhalation, got back to the house, and it was a pile of smoldering rubble, like everything. And that's another moment that it was literally less than a year after Joseph had died. I'm standing there with my mom and my sisters, and it was just this real paradigm shifting experience as a young person where it was like every single belonging that we had was now gone. And I was so thankful, that we were okay and that I had my mom and my sisters, but it was a real moment of just like letting go of things and stuff and just having to kind of come to terms with that in a really dramatic way.
Wow. And so I think it's safe to say from a young age, you came to understand loss, right? But let me ask a kind of a pivoting question. Did you ever learn to grieve through all of this loss?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I didn't at the time. I really didn't. I had a lot of people that had quick fixes and short summaries of why things had happened, and everyone kind of, even those in our lives with good intentions that want to just help, they'll sort of explain away, well, this happened, but especially when you lose a loved one too. And that was hard for me. That was really hard because the explanations that I got from my little brother at the time were, well, now he's in heaven and he's praying for you, and it's a good thing and all this stuff. And it's just, those things are very difficult to grieve appropriately and mourn appropriately, not just at a young age, but then when you have just a mix of different input and advice from people from every direction. And so, to answer your question, I didn't know how to grieve. I didn't know how to mourn.
And part of it is like, how are you expected to grieve from it when some of it is, at 13, 14 years old, it's also out of our comprehension.
Yeah. No,
Like
absolutely. Yeah.
we can't let alone we can't comprehend everything that's going on, let alone be able to properly grieve it. And you and I both know that there's this map that says, oh, this is the grieving process and this is what grief looks like for people. But from our own experiences, we know that's not true. Grief looks significantly different for each person, and it's hard to map it out. And so you have these experiences early on in life, and that kind of led to some coping mechanisms and some things that kind of followed you around for a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I ended up dropping out of school, so didn't finish 8th grade, and I was supposed to be homeschooling, but I got a full-time job working in the back of a kitchen the day after my 14th birthday, which was just shortly after the house, working for in this restaurant and just full time, and I just couldn't wait to grow up. Couldn't wait to just move on. All the struggle and the hardship that my dad had sort of brought into our home through his addictions. I just wanted to get away from it, man. And I think that was a way that I felt, again, just to sort of retreat and to run away. And so at a young age, I discovered alcohol. And I had wanted to stay away from hard substances, knowing some very specifically that my dad had been addicted to. And I didn't want to be like that, so I thought I'd be safe with alcohol. And man, when I was young and I tried it, it felt good. I felt better. It was this false sense of love and just relief. And when it scared me the first time, because I got drunk very young, very easily. And I was really scared about, falling into that kind of pattern of behavior or something. And sure enough, it did happen. And so I started becoming dependent on alcohol pretty young. Didn't really have a clear sense of direction or where I was going to go. I sort of had this plan that I was going to get a backpack and maybe just go to Europe and see what was going to, where life would take me. And I found out I was going to be a dad. And so at this point I was 17 and I learned I was going to be a father, and it just shifted everything. It shifted everything. I wanted to be a good dad more than anything. I was shocked again. I had not planned on becoming a dad. Sure. But when I found out that news, man, I just thought this is my purpose in life. This is why I'm here, and I'm going to figure out how to be a good dad. And it was a big moment as a kid.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so, interestingly enough, I think we all have these moments in life, right, where something happens and at first it gets our attention, right? But a lot of us are also pretty stubborn, or we put on blinders, right? And so, this happens, trauma mixed with addiction, mixed with all of these things. You find out you're going to be a dad at 17. So was that it? Was that what happened? And then from there on, life was gumdrops and rainbows?
Part of me wishes that I could say yes, but no, absolutely not, man. I ended up, I tried the best I could. I'll say that. I definitely did. But man, I was so confused about so many things. And, I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there that know, no matter what age you are when you become a parent, there's a steep learning curve. There's a lot to figure out. And so without having kind of a role model or a blueprint of even knowing what I was doing, the dad that I had, was one that I didn't want to do things like he did. But I tried my best, man. And it was just, challenge after challenge for me. And I had grown up with very low self-esteem. And so at a certain point after a few years, I just couldn't get it together. I had tried, and I thought no matter what I was going to do, I'd always just be a failure. And that's really the way that the enemy gets so many of us is obviously through lies and deception and manipulating, distorting the truth. And so many of us can fall into this dark pattern of behavior, or this pit sometimes, where we end up thinking that no matter what, it can't get better. Maybe we've tried something and we've failed too many times, and then we're convinced, well, I'll always fail at that. Or because we failed at something, then we take that sense of identity and we say that, well, I'm a failure, and that's certainly what I did. And like I said, when I found I was going to be a dad, that gave me that sense of purpose. And because I wasn't able to figure out how to be a good dad, I loved my little boy and my eldest daughter, but I was so confused and had so much self-loathing that I literally believed that they'd be better without me. And that was the enemy's lie and deceit that I believed. So I became suicidal.
Yeah. Wow. So here you are. By this point, I'm guessing 20-ish.
I want to say, yeah, probably 19. I think I would have been 20. Yeah, my early 20s was 22. By the time I hit bottom, and I'll never forget the moment I was there. Actually, I was looking in the mirror. I was by myself. I had a bottle of liquor, and I was looking in the mirror, man, and it was like the person looking back at me I couldn't even recognize. It's wild to talk about, because now in retrospect, so many years later, I know exactly what was going on. And there was, a very real spiritual attack that's happening. And life is a battleground in this way. We're in spiritual warfare many times, many seasons of life. And this is certainly one of those moments. And the enemy really came in pretty heavy in that moment. And I remember saying things to myself in the mirror that were just absolutely dark. And I made an attempt. And so I woke up the next day, and I realized, oh my gosh, like this is it. This is it. And I said, God, if you're up there, lead me and I'll follow, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I didn't want to die. I wanted to be a good man. I wanted to be a good husband one day. I wanted to be a good father. And I didn't think that I'd be able to, but I knew that the only other option was that it was all going to be over. And so I started to begin that process of surrender with him. And
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but that's like, you hit on something that I really think is important, right? Statistics tell us that most suicidal people don't want to die, right?
Yeah.
But they're experiencing a pain, whether it's physical, emotional, mental. They're experiencing something that is so severe that death appears as an upgrade, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
I've spoken multiple times about my own attempt, and I was in that same place where I was just so tired of everything, and I didn't feel like I could be the husband I was supposed to be, the father that I was called to be. I didn't feel like I could achieve these things, and it's also not like I just gave up, right? I didn't just quit. I wasn't like,
Right.
Oh, whatever, good try. I wanted it and I fought for it, but much like you, I couldn't figure it out, and I felt like I was a burden and a barrier from them to live the life that they were trying to live, and I think that's
exactly it, man. That's you hit it on the head. That's the lie. And I think so many people that are on the outside, they're like, well, can't you just get over it, or, move past this, or, toughen up, or whatever the explanation might be. But the very lie that brings you to that place of just utter despair and hopelessness is actually one where it's like, gosh, I really believe that everybody is better off if I'm not here. And that is such a, it's so insidious. It's so destructive to think like that. And so anybody that's out there listening that's maybe in a state right now in their life where they're feeling that way. Bryan and I just want to tell you straight up, like, that is not true. We might not know you personally, but if you're starting to have that type of thinking that everyone in your life is going to be better off without you, I promise you that is not true. And no matter what it is that you've gone through, no matter what it is that you've done, we'll be able to share where our lives have gone, where my life has gone. But I promise, in your own life, right, it can be transformed in ways that you would never imagine. And that's where things took off.
So here you are, just to kind of recap: traumatic childhood, instability, as you said, unstable, significant loss, addiction, surrounded kind of by chaos, dropped out of school at 8th grade, got a job, was trying to do the right thing, but couldn't figure out the right thing, ended up having your first child. Now we're in your early 20s, you're sitting by yourself with a bottle of liquor, you look in the mirror and you decide this is it, and you have your attempt.
That's right. Yeah. I'd been homeless for a short time too. And that was one of those things that was a piece of evidence for me why, I just wasn't going to be able to pull it together. Because when you get into that point too, you're an addict and living having to keep a car running in the middle of winter just to stay warm inside in the parking lot of a place where you're working so you can be there early enough. It was just like, gosh, and not having any concept of where or how to go forward, not having the tools, the resources, the information or knowledge or the awareness, of how to make better decisions. And unfortunately, the other thing too is people, when you get that low, and this, Bryan, it goes beyond just being sad, right? You become numb. You don't feel anymore. And unfortunately, there might be a lot of loved ones around you, and you can't feel that love the same way anymore. You can't feel that they're in your corner, that they want to be there to support you, and that light at the end of the tunnel gets so dim that it's more than just a dark hole to climb out of. It's just hopelessness, like I said. So that was that state.
That's right. Ooh.
It's heavy, man. It's heavy. It's hard to go back, and to try to relive some of those moments, to be honest. But the beautiful thing is what I learned in having that second chance at life and being able to wake back up and just say, hey, this should be better, and it can be better. Right. I don't know how, but God, if you're real, if you exist, help me, Right. And that's the beautiful thing, and that beautiful opportunity that every single person has available to them. No matter if you're incarcerated right now, if you're dealing with addiction, if you're dealing with grief or loss, that's the only decision you have to make to get started on that other path, going in a different direction. It's just saying, God, I'm open. I'm here. Help me.
That's right.
That's all you have to do.
I hope you enjoyed part 1 of Wesley's story. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, and come back next week for part 2.